the return of the body to the soil. Hear me clearly. Cremation is not just a cultural practice. It is an act of rebellion against the very design of God. Burial is not a human tradition, it is God's command. Every prophet, every servant, every righteous one was laid into the ground, not burned into ashes. From the beginning of time, those who honored God knew that the body must be returned to the earth, for this is the cycle ordained by the Creator. But the nations who rejected God's ways, the nations that bowed to idols, they are the ones who burned their dead, thinking the smoke carried them into the heavens. This is not worship, it is abomination. Beloved, I must ask you, who will you follow? The order of God or the customs of the pagans? Will you return your body to the earth in humility, or will you cast it into the fire in rebellion? Many say, it does not matter what happens to the body, the soul has already departed. But hear me. When God has spoken, it matters. The smallest detail matters. The dust belongs to God. The bones belong to God. The ground waits to receive what God has formed. It is not for you to decide what is sacred or not. It is for God alone. Let me tell you this with authority. Cremation brings a curse upon families who choose it. For when you choose fire over earth, you choose the way of destruction over the way of surrender. Fire consumes in wrath, while earth receives in peace. Fire is the judgment of God, but earth is the cradle of His design. Do not confuse the fire of punishment with the fire of holiness. To burn the body is to place it under judgment when God has called it to rest in the soil. This is why so many nations walk under hidden curses. They burn their dead, thinking it is noble, thinking it is respectful, thinking it is release. But in truth, they have aligned with rebellion. They have chosen man's way, not God's way. They have mocked the order of dust to dust, and they wonder why their land is cursed, why their families are restless, why their peace is stolen. God is not mocked. What He has ordained, no man can undo. And I speak to those who argue and say, but God is merciful. God does not care about the body after death. Be careful with such words. Mercy does not cancel order. Mercy does not erase law. Mercy is not permission for disobedience. God is merciful to the repentant, not to those who rebel and justify sin. The moment you say, God does not care, you are calling Him a liar, for God cares about every detail He created. He formed the dust, He breathed into it, He commanded the return of it. Do not play with His order. Do not twist His truth to justify man's rebellion. When you bury, you honor God. When you bury, you humble yourself to His command. When you bury, you testify that you came from the earth, and you shall return to the earth. Burial is not just a tradition, it is a declaration of faith in God's design. But cremation is a declaration of defiance, a silent voice that says, I will choose fire, I will choose my own way, I will not return as you commanded. Do you see the danger? Do you feel the weight of this? The fire that men light for cremation is not holy fire. It is strange fire. It is the same strange fire that led nations into idol worship, into sacrificing their children, into offering their dead to gods that were no gods at all. This is why God abhors it. This is why He clarifies it. This is why He warns us not to walk in the ways of the nations, not to follow their abominations, not to mix light with darkness. Beloved, do not be deceived by the softness of culture. Culture will excuse anything. Culture will tell you that evil is normal, that sin is choice, that rebellion is freedom. But when God speaks, culture bows down. When God commands, tradition must die. When God clarifies, there is no room for argument. Cremation is sin because it breaks the command of God concerning the body. It rejects dust to dust and chooses fire to ash. It replaces humility with pride. It takes what is sacred and makes it common. I must tell you with urgency, if your family has practiced cremation, you must repent and break the curse. You must ask God for mercy. You must stand before Him and declare that you will not follow the way of fire, but the way of earth. You must separate yourself from the rebellion of nations. For as long as you continue in their ways, you share in their judgments. But when you return to God's way, you open the door for His blessing to rest upon your household. Beloved, I must press this truth deeper into your heart. When God speaks of life and death, He does not speak carelessly. Life is His creation. Death is not the end. It is a doorway into eternity. The way we handle the body, even after the soul departs, is a testimony of what we believe about God. When a man is laid in the ground, it is not merely flesh being buried. It is a declaration of faith that the dust belongs to God and will return to Him. But when a man is burned into ashes, it is a proclamation of rebellion, a testimony of disregard, and a denial of the order that God has set. Do not underestimate this. Every act, every choice, every detail matters in the eyes of God. Men may laugh and say, it makes no difference. The soul has already gone. But think, does God create anything without purpose? Does He form dust into flesh and declare it sacred only for us to decide its end by fire? No, my beloved, God does not create without meaning. The body has meaning. The burial has meaning. The return to dust has meaning. It is not symbolic. It is sacred order. Fire in the hands of God is always a tool of judgment, purification, or destruction. Look at the earth. Look at the scriptures. When God consumes with fire, it is because of sin. Fire falls as wrath, as a sign of rejection, as an act of cleansing. But never once has God commanded fire as the way to honor a body He formed. Never once did God say, burn what I have made. He said, return it to the dust. That is the law. That is the truth. That is the way. Do you see the deception of the world? The nations, without God, burn their dead as if it were noble. They scatter ashes as if the body is worthless. They say, it is cheaper, it is easier, it is practical. But let me ask you, when did obedience to God ever come down to cost? When did honoring His command ever come down to convenience? Do you think God looks at the one who excuses rebellion and says, because it was cheaper, I will accept your disobedience? No, God demands honor above economy, truth above tradition, obedience above ease. And I must warn you, cremation does not only dishonor the dead, it opens the door for spiritual confusion among the living. Families who burn their loved ones often carry a heaviness, a restlessness, a sense of guilt they cannot explain. Why? Because the soul has departed, but the act has testified against God's order. The earth that should have received the body has been denied. The fire that was never commanded has been chosen. And this disobedience lingers like smoke in the spiritual atmosphere, unsettling hearts, troubling families, breaking peace. Beloved, hear me with urgency. This is why God clarifies it. He does not want His people to fall into the practices of the nations. He does not want you to be deceived by tradition. He does not want your family to be bound by the curses of disobedience. He wants you to walk in His light, in His truth, in His perfect order. He wants you to honor Him in life and in death, in breath and in dust. He wants every part of your being, soul, spirit, and body, to testify of His greatness. Look at the ground beneath your feet. That soil is not ordinary. It is holy. God has chosen the earth as the cradle of man's beginning and the resting place of man's end. You walk on dust every day, but that dust holds the mystery of life. God shaped it into flesh. God sustained it with His breath. And God commanded that it must return. To deny the ground its rightful possession is to defy God's decree. To give the body to fire is to give it to destruction when God has appointed peace. And let me tell you, my beloved, there is something powerful about burial. When a body is placed into the ground, the earth becomes a witness. The soil testifies, this belongs to God. This has returned as commanded. The ground itself receives the body in obedience to God's design. There is peace in burial, for it aligns with divine order. But when fire consumes the flesh, there is no testimony of obedience. The fire testifies of rebellion. The smoke rises, but it does not ascend as honor. It ascends as defiance. Some of you may still wonder, but what if the person did not know? What if they were deceived by tradition? Beloved, ignorance is not greater than truth. God calls us now to clarity. What was hidden is revealed. What was ignored is being exposed. God is giving you this knowledge not to condemn you, but to save you. For when you know the truth, you are responsible to walk in it. When you know the command, you are called to obey it. From this day forward, you cannot claim blindness. You have heard, you have been warned, you have been given light. This is why you must not only obey for yourself, but teach your children, your families, your communities. For the deception of cremation has spread like wildfire. It has entered households, it has entered lands, it has entered nations. And many do it without question, without prayer, without seeking God. But you, beloved, are called to stand apart. You are called to walk differently. You are called to obey God's word, even when the world mocks you. Let them laugh, let them scorn, let them call you foolish. But know this, the wisdom of God will always outlast the foolishness of men. Do not fear being indifferent. Do not fear rejecting the customs of the nations. Do not fear honoring God when others dishonor Him, for the blessing of God will rest on the obedient, while the curse rests on the rebellious. Your family will be preserved. Your generations will walk in light. Your land will be free from hidden bondage. if you choose God's way over the world's way. Beloved, it is not about ashes, it is about authority. It is not about tradition, it is about truth. It is not about choice, it is about command. God has spoken, and when God clarifies, all excuses fall silent. Cremation is not a personal matter, it is not a cultural option. It is sin because it violates divine order. And sin, no matter how small men consider it, always separates us from God's blessing. This is why you must rise today with conviction. Decide in your heart, I will honor God in life and in death. I will not hand my body to fire. I will return to the dust as commanded. I will not follow the nations, I will follow God. This decision may make you stand alone, but it will make you stand under the covering of God's favor. This choice may separate you from tradition, but it will connect you to divine truth. This obedience may offend some, but it will please God. And what greater reward is there than to please the one who formed you? Beloved, listen with trembling hearts, for what I speak now carries the weight of eternity. When God commands, it is not merely suggestion, it is eternal law. And when God clarifies, it is not for debate but for obedience. The sin of cremation is not just in the fire that consumes the body, but in the spirit of rebellion that fuels it. Every flame that burns flesh outside of God's order is a statement against His authority. It is a declaration that says, I will not return to the earth as commanded. I will chart my own way. And do you not see? That is the very language of pride. The same pride that led the first rebellion in heaven. Cremation does more than desecrate the body. It disrupts the testimony of God's cycle of life. From the beginning, God said, dust you are, and to dust you shall return. This is not merely poetry. This is not merely a symbol. It is the foundation of how life and death are understood before the throne of God. To cremate is to rip apart that testimony and replace it with a counterfeit declaration. Dust you are, but to ashes you shall become. That is not God's word. That is man's distortion. That is rebellion clothed in ritual. The nations of the earth that embraced cremation did not do so out of reverence for God. They did so because they had lost the knowledge of Him. They burned their dead to honor idols, to release spirits, to please false gods. And now, in modern times, people say, we do not do it for idols, we do it for convenience, we do it for cost. But beloved, sin does not lose its power because you rename it. Rebellion does not become obedience because you rebrand it. What began as abomination remains abomination. Even if men dress it in new garments, hear me with your spirit open. God does not measure obedience by the reasons you give. He measures it by the actions you take. You may say, but my heart was sincere. Yet, if your actions violate His command, sincerity will not erase disobedience. You may say, but I did not know. Yet ignorance will not stand when truth has been revealed. God has made His order clear as dust to dust. Anything else is rebellion. Anything else is sin. And do not think this matter small, for when God calls something sin, it carries weight. The act of cremation is not hidden in the corner. It rises as smoke into the heavens, declaring defiance. Families who accept it invite unrest into their homes, not because God delights in punishing, but because disobedience always carries consequence. The spirit of rebellion, once entertained, opens doors to confusion, sorrow, and hidden curses. Families find themselves wrestling with heaviness, unable to explain the unease. They do not know that the act of fire against flesh has testified against them before God. Beloved, let me tell you something deep. The body you carry is not merely yours. It is on loan from God. It is His craftsmanship, His temple, His design. To burn it is to treat the temple as rubbish. To burn it is to say, this which God has formed is fit for fire. Do you not tremble at such a thought? The body, though perishable, was made with divine hands. And God demands that what He formed be returned with dignity, not destroyed with flames of pride. This is why every prophet, every righteous man, every servant of God was placed into the ground. It was never a debate. It was never a question. It was divine order. To rest in the earth is to testify of submission. To be buried is to declare, I came from God's dust and I return to God's dust. It is humility in its purest form, but cremation robs you of that testimony. Cremation silences that declaration. Cremation makes the final act of your body one of rebellion instead of surrender. Some of you may think, but fire purifies, does it not? Yes, fire in God's hands purifies. But when fire is chosen in defiance of His command, it is not purification, it is desecration. Fire purifies when God lights it, not when man manipulates it. Fire refines when God ordains it, not when culture demands it. To cremate in the name of purification is to clothe sin with false righteousness. Do not be deceived. God is not fooled by names. He sees the heart and the action. Beloved, understand this clearly. Burial is not tradition, it is obedience. Cremation is not choice, it is sin. And when you see the world embracing cremation, you must understand it is a symptom of their distance from God. They have lost the reverence for the sacredness of life. They no longer see the dust as holy. They no longer recognize the dignity of the temple. They no longer fear God. That is why they burn what He formed. That is why they reduce to ashes what He called precious. But you are not called to walk like them. You are called to walk in the fear of God. You are called to honor Him in all things, even in death. You are called to be a testimony, not a contradiction. When the world chooses fire, you must choose dust. When the nations burn, you must bury. When others rebel, you must obey. For in your obedience, you carry not only your own testimony, but the testimony of generations after you. Do you not see? When you bury as God commanded, you plant a seed of obedience that your children will inherit. They will know the order of God because you honored it. They will respect the dust because you returned to it. They will fear God because you demonstrated fear in the smallest of details. But if you cremate, you pass down rebellion. You teach your children that convenience is greater than command, that cost is greater than obedience, that tradition is greater than truth. And they will follow that path, not knowing it leads to bondage. Beloved, God is calling you now to stand apart. This is not a message for those who are comfortable. This is a message for those who are willing to obey, even when the world resists. This is a message for those who fear God more than they fear culture. This is a message for those who desire blessing more than acceptance. If you will honor God in this, He will honor you in ways you cannot imagine. If you will return to dust, He will return to you blessing. If you will reject fire, He will cover you with peace. And let me tell you a mystery the earth remembers. The soil holds testimony. When a body is placed in the ground in obedience, the earth itself becomes a witness before God. But when fire consumes, there is no witness but smoke, a witness of rebellion. Which testimony do you want recorded in the heavens over your life? Which testimony do you want echoing in eternity? That you obeyed God, or that you chose the way of the nations? This, my beloved, is why God clarifies it. He leaves no room for confusion. He leaves no space for argument. He declares with finality, the body must return to the dust. And those who obey will walk in blessing, while those who defy will reap the consequence of rebellion. Beloved, hear me again with the ears of your spirit, for this matter must not be taken lightly. The command of God is not a small thing. Every word He speaks carries eternity within it. And when He establishes order, He seals it with His own authority. Dust must return to dust, for that is the decree of the Creator. To cremate is not simply an alternative method. It is a rebellion against that decree. It is to rewrite the command of God with human hands, to trade divine truth for human opinion. And no man can alter what God has fixed from the foundation of the world. Think of this, beloved. Fire was never given to man as a way of honoring the body. Fire, from the beginning, was a tool of God's judgment. It was fire that fell on the rebellious cities. Fire that consumed the disobedient. Fire that served as a symbol of wrath. When you choose fire to end a life, you align the body with judgment instead of rest. You bring the imagery of punishment upon what God declared should be returned in peace. Do you see the depth of this? Do you understand why this angers the heart of God? The fire He reserved for judgment has been twisted into a ritual for the dead. It is a mockery of His order. Burial, however, carries humility. Burial speaks of surrender. To be placed in the ground is to declare, I came from God's earth and I return to God's earth. That act itself preaches a sermon to the living. It reminds those who watch that all flesh is temporary, that pride must fall, that the ground waits for us all. It is a testimony of submission to God's design. But cremation silences this testimony. It shouts instead, I will choose my own end. I will not return as commanded. I will burn, I will scatter, I will take control. And in that moment, the final act of the body testifies of defiance instead of obedience. Beloved, the nations of the world embraced cremation when they abandoned the knowledge of God. They turned their faces from Him and followed after idols. Have you ever reached a moment in life where you felt like everything was falling apart? Where the weight on your shoulders seemed unbearable? Where every door slammed shut and the people you thought you could rely on turned their backs on you? In those moments, the voice of despair whispers, "It's over. Nothing will change. You are stuck here forever." But I came to tell you today with unwavering conviction, do not believe that lie. Trust God. He will fix your situation. When you look at the ruins of your life, God sees the blueprint for restoration. When you see chaos, God sees order. When you feel hopeless, God is preparing a breakthrough that will leave you speechless. There is a truth that cannot be shaken. God has never failed, and He will not start failing with you. Your situation may look impossible. Your bank account may be empty. Your health may be weak. Your relationships may be broken. Your mind may be heavy with worry. But listen, God does not ask you to solve what only He can solve. He asks you to trust Him. Trust is not passive. Trust is active faith. Trust is saying, I may not see the way, but I know God has the way. Trust is declaring, though I am surrounded by storms, I know God will calm the waves. Trust is standing firm when every voice tells you to give up, and still believing that God will fix it. Do not let your present trouble deceive you. Do not let your pain make you blind to the power of God. The same God who created the heavens and the earth, who spoke light into darkness, who separated seas and raised nations. This is the God who is watching over you right now. Your problem may be big, but God is greater. Your enemies may be many, but God is stronger. Your resources may be few, but God owns everything. When you lean on Him, you will find that what looks shattered in human eyes is only a canvas for His miracle. Some of you are living in silence, carrying secret burdens that no one knows. You cry in the dark, smile in the light, but inside you are weary. You are asking, why is this happening? When will it change? Does anyone care? I assure you, God cares. God has seen your tears. God has heard your prayers. And God has already set in motion the answer. The delay is not denial. The waiting is not rejection. The silence is not abandonment. Trust God. He will fix it at the right time, in the right way, with a result so perfect that you will understand why He made you wait. When you fix your eyes on the problem grows bigger. But when you fix your eyes on God, the problem shrinks in comparison to His greatness. Some of you are chained by fear. You keep replaying what could go wrong instead of believing in what God can make right. Fear is the enemy of trust. Fear whispers lies. You will never recover. You will never succeed. You will never be free. But faith anchored in God declares, my destiny is in the hands of the Almighty. My future cannot be destroyed by fear. My tomorrow is safe in His plan. God has never abandoned those who trust Him, and He will not abandon you. Even now, God is working behind the scenes, even when you cannot see it. He is aligning circumstances. Even when you cannot feel it, He is strengthening you. Even when nothing seems to move, He is preparing the shift. That sickness that looks final is not final with God. That failure that seems permanent is not permanent with God. That betrayal that broke your heart will not stop your destiny with God. Trust Him with every detail of your life, and you will see that He takes what was meant for harm and turns it into good. Stop trying to control what you were never meant to control. Stop worrying about what you cannot change. Stop exhausting yourself with questions that only God has the answers to. Instead, surrender. Lift your heart and say, God, I trust you. Even if I don't understand, I trust you. Even if it hurts, I trust you. Even if I cannot see, I trust you. That act of surrender is not weakness. It is the greatest strength you will ever know. Because when you let go, God steps in. When you stop fighting battles that are not yours, God fights them for you. When you lay down your burden, God carries it with His power. Remember, these situations change, but God does not change. People may fail you, but God will never fail you. Doors may close, but God can open new ones no one can shut. Enemies may rise against you, but God can silence them with a single word. Trust Him. Trust Him when the night feels endless. Trust Him when the valley is deep. Trust Him when the storm is violent. Trust Him when nothing makes sense. Because trusting God is never wasted.